Hello and welcome back to a phone related video. Yes, I haven't done one of those for a very long time. And today we're going to be taking a look at the iPhone 4S, which actually sold over 60 million units and was released back in 2011. But is it still useful here in 2022? Well, let's find out. The phone was actually announced a day prior to Steve Jobs' death on the 4th of October 2011. Being available to the public only 10 days later in certain parts of the world. It's pretty easy to understand why the keynote was lacking a bit of energy given that they knew Steve didn't have long to live. From a design perspective, it's nearly identical to the older iPhone 4, which saw a price drop to $99 on contract as of the iPhone 4S announcement, albeit with subtle design changes to the antenna band layout. You may remember the reception issues dubbed Antenna Gate with the iPhone 4, where holding it with your left hand would cause a few bars to drop. Gotta hand it to Apple for not really admitting to a design flaw, yet fixing the flaw in the next product release. The main differences are inside, with the S in 4S standing for speed, or maybe Siri. Yes, the voice assistant millions now rely on made its debut on this iPhone. There was also a new Apple A5 processor, an improved camera, and it saw software support all the way from iOS 5 to iOS 9. Which I wouldn't recommend using as it is slow as heck. So here's a short summary of my experience running the iPhone 4S in iOS 9.3.6. Doing anything throughout the phone feels quite sluggish, but for phone calls and texts, it does the job. An older, still supported version of Gmail does work, however it is very slow. The latest YouTube app available does not work, however you can still watch YouTube through the browser, it's just very slow. Facebook Messenger no longer works, the Google Docs app no longer works, and quite a few old games do actually work. Remember Flappy Bird? Well, it still plays fine in iOS 9. The Google Drive app is also still functional. These are just some of the apps I use on a regular basis, most of which struggle or fail to work entirely in iOS 9. Running iOS 9 is clearly pushing the A5 SoC and puny 512 megabytes of RAM. Coming from a big slab of a phone, it was actually quite surprising how difficult it was to get used to such a small screen. But in saying that, it's pretty impressive what you can still do with this 3.5-inch display. This is really a phone that can be used with one hand. Even though the corners are very angular, I find it comfortable to hold. The buttons and physical mute switch have a great tactile feeling and are fun to press. But even back in 2011, Android phones were quite a lot bigger. Some people even said this HTC Sensation XL was too big. Oh, how times have changed. And this is also the last iPhone to use the large 40-pin connector. In hindsight, when I bought this back in 2019, I shouldn't have updated the OS. But it is actually possible to downgrade it back to version 6.1.3. This requires jailbreaking the iPhone. I've left a tutorial in the description that I personally followed, so let's dust off my old Windows laptop and begin. Once you've downloaded version 2.5.5 of 3U Tools and have connected your iPhone, it should be detected. This iPhone still has 91% battery health, which is excellent for a device manufactured in 2012. And before running the jailbreak software, make sure to disable real-time protection through Windows Security. Then I began the jailbreak, which seemed to run without issue, and following the prompts on the iPhone, I installed Cydia. The phone restarted and was finally jailbroken. The tutorial then called for the removal of 3U Tools version 2.55. Once removed, I unzipped the downgrade files provided and installed 3U Tools version 2.3.8 because I'm running Windows 10. In the Cydia jailbreak app, add a source called repo.tiermaster.net. Then install the Tweak KDFU app. On the home screen, run that app and select all available options and the phone will go into DFU mode. From here you can use the Pro Flash tool to install version 6.1.3 that was included with the tutorial. All I had to do now was click Flash so that the downgrade could begin. Don't be surprised if this takes many minutes to complete. And jumping back into 3U Tools, we can see that it's successfully downgraded and we're now running iOS 6.1.3. Now we can have a blast from the past setting up an iPhone with iOS 6. This version was first released back in September of 2012 alongside the iPhone 5, but ultimately it looks pretty similar to the previous versions. It was iOS 7 that really looked a whole lot different. And now we are free to use iOS 6. Boy, is this far more fluid and responsive or what? While the phone is fast and responsive, pretty quickly I found out that most apps are no longer supported. This was also the case to a slightly lesser extent in iOS 9 as well, though I was able to still download some apps thankfully. I'll happily take the trade-off of less apps for a phone that runs well. And oh wow, that's a really old school Game Center login screen. and Flappy Bird runs great on this device. Some of the games will still download compatible versions, however a number of those still didn't work. I don't know about you, but I don't even know what my ringtone is since it's always on silent. But hearing these old tones brings back so many memories. And it is possible to browse modern websites using Safari, which is pretty impressive given how weak this hardware is today. And watching YouTube videos is also possible, and it ran very well in the browser. Some of you may remember this classic game, Doodle Jump. I can't really play it properly since the phone is currently attached to the table though. Another one I recall everyone playing back in high school was Temple Run. This 3D endless runner was also released in 2011, just like this iPhone. Apple Maps was also released alongside iOS 6. It was heavily criticized at the time for being quite inaccurate though. Even the icon suggests driving off a bridge onto a major highway. Not a good idea if I'm honest. One area modern smartphones really excel in are their cameras, but let's see just what we can do with the 8 megapixel shooter here on the iPhone 4S. In favorable lighting conditions, you can still take good photos. The images are fine, maybe a little bit flat, but that's how iPhone photography has been for quite some time. Dynamic range is also pretty good. There is still detail in the shadows, even though the background and sky are in bright sunlight. The front-facing camera is also there, but it only has a resolution of 640 by 480. Getting inside the iPhone 4S is also pretty easy. First, you'll want to turn off the iPhone. On the base are two small pentalobe screws. They're very small, so be sure not to strip the heads or lose them for that matter. To remove the back glass, all you've got to do is push upwards, revealing the internals within. You can actually replace the back for under $6 on eBay. On modern iPhones, it is a lot more costly and difficult due to the glass being fused to the frame of the device. And while I had the device open, I wiped off the gunk that had built up around the edges with some isopropyl alcohol. The battery in here is still strong at 91% capacity, but if you want to replace it, you can find aftermarket ones for as little as $12.50 in Australia. You could also get a different coloured backplate if you wanted your iPhone to stand out. And to remove any lint or pocket fluff from the connector, I blew it with air and dislodged any debris with the end of a match. I also used some isopropyl alcohol to help dislodge gunk built up in the speaker grills. It's not perfect, but it's a lot cleaner now. And if you're ever having problems connecting your wired headphones, there's a good chance some pocket fluff has made its way into the 3.5mm jack. And because this device has glass on both the back and the front, it's been pretty difficult to keep clean, and it is a real fingerprint magnet. If you want to do a more thorough job, you could always completely tear down the device, but this one isn't overly dirty to begin with. I honestly feel like a lot of people could still get by using this phone, although 3G coverage is not guaranteed for much longer and it hasn't received any software updates for quite some time. And yeah, this thing doesn't actually support 4G networks, only 3G. Downgrading the device to iOS 6 made for a mostly improved experience. It's so much smoother at the expense of a few more apps not working. But don't get me wrong, barely any apps were still usable in iOS 9. There are still some graphically impressive games that will work in iOS 6, showing just how capable this little device from 2011 really is. There's honestly something so magical and tangible about this little brick of a phone. And if you wanted to pick one up yourself, you could get one off of eBay for about $30 Australian. And I've got a whole box of old phones, so maybe I'll make some other videos like this in the near future. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the first video back for 2022, and I've got plenty more planned for the future. Have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.